The day the orphan train left without her at age 8, a Lakota chief found her grown and alone. The crow was already dead when I found it. Lying in the grass at the edge of my territory, one wing spread wide, the other folded under its body like it had tried to land and simply run out of time. I stood over it a moment. My horse, Shunka Wichhasa horseman, he didn't like it. Sidestepped, blew through his nose. I told him to be still. The crow was an omen, yes, but not all omens are warnings. Some are just the world showing you what it is. I am Chante Chihila. The name my people gave me means he who loves his heart, a strange name for a chief, some said. My father gave it to me the morning I wept over a dead horse when I was 5 years old. He said a man who weeps for a horse will never betray a friend. He was right about that. I have not always been right about everything, but I have always been right to carry that name. I am 61 years old as I tell you this. I have led my band of Oglala through treaty years and drought years, and the years the buffalo stopped coming. I have buried a wife. I buried 2 sons. I still rise before the sun because that is what I have always done, and a man does not stop the habits that kept him alive just because the living has grown harder. The crow, the dead one, I left it there. Let the earth take it. I was riding west that morning, following the creek line that runs below the ridgeline we called Broken Tooth because of the way one of the peaks splits at the top, 2 fingers pointing at the sky. It was late August. The grass had gone pale and thin, and the sky was that particular blue you only get in the high plains when summer is starting to let go clean, high, cold at the edges, hot in the middle. The creek was low. You could see the stones on the bottom clear as anything. That's when I saw the smoke. Not a cook fire, not a signal, something between the kind of smoke that comes from a fire somebody made in a hurry and then left to go out on its own, thin and white and drifting south. I followed it. She was about a 1/4 mile from where the smoke was, sitting with her back against a cottonwood tree, one boot off, her foot in the creek. She didn't hear me come up because the water was moving fast enough there to cover the sound of hooves on soft ground. I stopped about 30 yards back and looked at her for a long moment. She was white. That was the first thing. Sunburned and dirty and thin in that way that isn't just a few days without eating, that's weeks, maybe months. Her hair was the color of creek mud, hanging in pieces around her face. She had a rifle across her lap. An old Sharps, and she was holding it with both hands in a way that told me she knew how to use it, even with her foot in the water, even half asleep or near to it. I made a sound. Just a low, deliberate sound, not words, not a call, just enough to let her know something was there before she saw me. She was up in a half-second, rifle raised, cheek against the stock, eye on me. I put my hands out, palms forward, slow. A man does not hurry his hands when there is a woman with a rifle who has something to prove. We stayed like that for what felt like a long time, probably wasn't. The creek ran. A hawk went over. She didn't fire. Finally she said, in a voice that had some gravel in it from not being used, "I'm not lost." I did not say you were, I told her. She didn't lower the rifle. "What do you want?" I looked past her at the cottonwood, at the scuff marks in the dirt around the roots, at the small bundle she had propped against the bark, canvas wrapped tight, tied with a rawhide cord. She'd been here at least a night, maybe 2. "There is a water hole," I said, 2 miles north, better than this, and shelter rock overhang faces south, stays warm. She squinted. "Why would you tell me that?" I didn't have a good answer for that. Not one she would have believed anyway. The truth was I had been riding alone for 4 days after the council meeting at the agency, and I was tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. And sometimes a man just does something because it's the right thing to do, and he doesn't have the patience to explain it to anyone, including himself. "Because you need it," I said, "and I am going there anyway." She held the rifle on me for another few seconds. Then she lowered it, not all the way down, just enough. "I'll follow you," she said, "but if you try anything." Then shoot me, I said. I would expect nothing less. Her name was Caroline Foss. She told me that on the second day, after we had made camp at the rock overhang, and she had eaten some of the dried meat I had, and I had eaten some of the hard biscuits she carried in her canvas bundle. She told me her name the way someone tells you a fact they're not sure matters quick, like getting it out of the way. I told her my name. She tried to say it, got the first part mostly right. You can call me Chant, I said. Nobody called me that. I don't know why I said it. She nodded like it was settled. That first night she kept the rifle across her legs even while she slept. I woke once and saw her sitting up, staring at the dark, and I pretended to still be asleep because I understood that she needed to believe she was watching over herself. I let her have that. In the morning she boiled water in a dented tin pot she pulled from the bundle, and she made coffee, real coffee, which I had not had in some time, and she poured some into my cup without asking and handed it across the fire without looking at me. Just held it out until I took it. Small things, that's how you learn a person. She was, I found out over the next several days, not traveling anywhere in particular. She had been at one point going to the town of Harlow, which was about 60 miles south and west, where she'd heard there was work at a laundry. But something had happened, she didn't say what, not yet, and she'd turned north instead of south, and now she wasn't going anywhere specific. She was just going. I knew that feeling. I had been going like that myself after my wife died, after my sons, just moving because stopping felt worse. I didn't say that to her, I just noted it and kept it. The rock overhang where we camped was a place I had known since boyhood. My father had stopped there once on a hunting trip when I was 7 or 8, and I had thought then that it was the finest shelter in the world. The rock curved overhead like a hand, and the south face meant the sun hit it early and the wind came from the north behind solid stone. My father had told me, always know where the good shelters are. You never know whose life you might save by knowing. I had thought he meant my own life. It turned out he meant more than that. On the third day, she told me about the train. We were riding. I had found an old mare at the agency 2 seasons ago, a gray-spotted thing with a bad left rear leg that still worked well enough for easy ground, and Caroline rode her while I rode Shunka Wichhasa, and we were moving through a long dry draw when she started talking. Not like she'd decided to. Like the talking just started happening and she didn't stop it. She said she had been 8 years old, in Indiana, a town she named that I have since forgotten. Her mother had died that spring and her father before that, and the county put the children on the Orphan train west, children to be placed with families who would take them. She and her younger brother Thomas, who was 6, and a girl she'd befriended on the train named Ida. She said they stopped at a town in Nebraska. The children were brought off the train onto a platform and people came to look them over. She said it was exactly like what it sounds like. People walking up and down, looking at the children, asking them questions about their health and their strength and whether they could work. She'd held Thomas's hand the whole time. She said his hand was small and always a little damp, the way small children's hands are, and he kept squeezing hers without knowing he was doing it. A family took Thomas, a farmer and his wife. She said the wife had a kind face. She was glad of that. The farmer signed the papers and the wife took Thomas by the hand and he looked back at Caroline over his shoulder and she told him with her eyes that it was all right, that she would be all right, and he went with them. Then she went back onto the train because nobody had chosen her. Except when she got back on the train, it was already moving. She said she didn't understand it at first. She thought she was on the wrong car. She went through 2 cars before someone, another child, a boy older than her, told her the train had been ready to leave and they'd counted wrong and left without the ones who were still on the platform. Just miscounted. Left without her. She went back to Indiana, back to the county. They put her in the children's home there. She stayed until she was 15 and then she left because she had to, and she had been moving ever since. 22 years of moving. She was 30 now. Thomas, she had never found Thomas. She'd written letters, 3 of them to the county in Nebraska, and gotten no answer. I listened to all of this without speaking. The draw widened out into a flat section with yellow grass and a few cottonwoods, and I let Shunka witch Hassa slow to a walk. She was looking straight ahead. Her hands on the mare's reins were still, not gripping. After a while I said, "The farmer's wife with the kind face, you remember that?" "Yes," she said. "Good," I said. "That memory costs you nothing and it's worth keeping." She glanced at me, not long, then back ahead. We rode another mile before either of us spoke again. I thought about what she had said. A child on a platform in the train leaving, a count that came out wrong. 22 years of a woman's life shaped by someone's arithmetic mistake. I thought about how many things in a life come down to something that's small, not a great decision, not even a bad decision, just a moment where someone was not paying close enough attention, and then everything that follows is different. Every road taken, every winter endured, every face never seen again. Thomas's hand in hers, small and damp, and then it wasn't. I have seen a great deal of loss in my years. My people have seen more than our share of it, more than should be asked of anyone. I do not say this to make it a contest. I say it because I know what it looks like in a person. The particular way loss shapes a face over years, the way it settles into the way someone holds their shoulders. Caroline Foss had it. I recognized it immediately because I had looked at it in the mirror every morning for 4 years. I need to tell you about my people before I tell you more about what happened. You need to understand what I was and what I carried, because without that none of the rest of it means anything. I had been chief of my band for 19 years. Not a war chief. We were past the years of war, past them by the time I took the role, and I say that not with bitterness, but just as the truth of the era we were living in. We had a reservation. We had an agent who came twice a year with supplies that were always less than promised and sometimes not what was promised at all. We had young men who were restless in ways I understood because I had been restless at their age, full of something that needed somewhere to go and finding the territory for it smaller every year. And we had old men who remembered things I was young enough to have only heard about. The Buffalo years, the years before the treaties, the years when the plains were still fully ours, and they looked at me sometimes like they were deciding whether I was doing enough. I was always deciding the same thing about myself. My wife Winnenshala, wise woman, though I just called her Weena, she died 4 years before I met Caroline. Winter sickness. She went in 3 days from a woman who still laughed at my jokes, which were not that funny, to a woman who couldn't lift her head off the blanket, and then she was gone. We had been together 31 years. I was there when each of my sons was born. I was there when each of them died, the first one from a fall at 12 years old, and the second one from the same sickness that took Weena 2 winters after her. After Weena, I stopped sleeping more than a few hours. After my second son, I started riding out alone for days at a time. My sister Thatchewin, Wind Woman, she worried about me, told me I was trying to disappear into the land. I told her that wasn't what I was doing. Maybe she was right, I still don't fully know. What I know is that when I found Caroline Foss sitting with her back against a cottonwood tree with a rifle across her lap, something in me settled for the first time in 4 years. Not because of her, specifically, not yet, not that morning. Just because there was something to do, something that was clearly and plainly needed. A task as simple and honest as, this woman is alone and in difficulty and I can do something about that. Simple work, good work. I had not had simple, good work in a long time. We made our way, over the course of a week, toward my band's summer camp. I hadn't planned that. I had told myself on that first day that I would show her the water hole and the shelter, and then go my own direction. Then the week passed and I was still riding with her. She asked about the 5th day, where we were headed. My people's camp, I said. She was quiet for a moment. Will they want me there? No, I said honestly, but they will accept it because I say so. She looked at me for a long time, That's not a very good answer. No, I said, but it's the true one. She turned it over in her mind. I could see it in the way she held her jaw not tight, just working through it. All right, she said finally. I'll go. I want to be clear about what I felt at that moment. It wasn't tenderness, not the way I would have named it then. It was something closer to good. That was all. Good. She would come. She would be safe. That was enough. We rode through country that opened up in the last 2 days before the camp. The draws gave way to a wide plain that ran to a long blue line of low hills in the west, and the sky in the evenings turned colors I had seen 10,000 times and still found difficult to just ride past without stopping. The light in September on the high plains is a particular thing. It goes gold, and then it goes red, and then it goes purple fast, like the day is in a hurry to be done. And the grass in that light looks like something other than grass, something older, something that has been here since before anyone was here and will be here long after. Caroline stopped on the second to last evening and looked at the sky for a solid minute without saying anything. I stopped beside her. She said, I've never been anywhere that looked like this. You have not seen it in the winter, I said. In the winter it is something else again. She turned to look at me. Is that an invitation? I had not meant it that way, but when she said it, I found I didn't want to correct the impression. Perhaps, I said. She looked back at the sky. The smile was there, the crooked one, higher on the left. She kept it mostly private. We reached the camp on the 8th day of riding. My sister Thaddeus was the first person I saw as we came down the slope toward the circle of lodges. She was standing outside her tipi, holding a bundle of something, and she watched us come in without moving. Then she looked at me with the expression she'd been perfecting her whole life, part question, part reprimand, part love. I got down off Shunka Wichhasa and led him to the picket line, and I said to her in Lakota, she has no one. She stays until she decides to go. Thaddeus looked at Caroline on the gray-spotted mare. Caroline was looking back at her with an expression I couldn't fully read from where I stood, watchful, not afraid. Thaddeus said in Lakota, she's thin. Yes, I said. And she has nobody. I said that. Thaddeus made a sound that I have spent 61 years being unable to transcribe. A short exhalation through the nose that manages to communicate both criticism and acceptance at the same time. And she set down her bundle and walked toward Caroline. I had been prepared to translate, to smooth things over, to stand between. But Thaddeus took the spotted mare's bridle and said, in English that I hadn't known she had, come down. I'll show you where to put the horse. Caroline looked at me over her shoulder as she dismounted. I nodded. That was the beginning of something I didn't have a name for yet. She stayed 2 weeks. Then she stayed another 2 weeks. She helped Thaddeus with the work of the camp, the drying of meat, the mending of things that needed mending, the careful process of brain-tanning hides that Thaddeus had done her whole life, and which Caroline approached with the same attention she brought to everything. Watch first, then try, then accept correction without complaint. She was not good at most of it in the beginning, but she did not pretend to be, and she did not stop trying. The women in the camp watched her with varying degrees of suspicion, which I understood. We had reasons for suspicion of white people, good reasons, old reasons. I did not ask anyone to simply set those aside. What I did was stay near, not hovering. I am not a man who hovers, but present, visible. When someone spoke to her with an edge that crossed a line I'd set, I said something, not loudly. Once was enough with most people. I have been chief long enough that most people in my camp know what once means coming from me. When 2 of the younger men began a conversation near her that they intended her to overhear, not a conversation that was kind, I told them, flat, to find better things to do with their morning. One of them, a young man named Mato Watihila, Bear Beloved, he pushed back. He said I was protecting a white woman when I should be thinking about my own people. He said it with the particular edge that young men use when they want to challenge a chief without quite crossing into open challenge. I looked at him for a moment. I gave him time to decide if he was done. He wasn't done. He said it wasn't right. He said we had enough problems without bringing them in from outside. I said, I am thinking about my people. I am thinking about what kind of people we want to be. We have been asked to be less than we are for a long time now. I will not ask us to be less than we are from inside as well. We have enough real enemies. We do not need to make enemies of women who have harmed no one. He didn't say anything after that. Caroline heard some of it. She spoke no Lakota then, but she understood enough from his tone and my response to know what it had been about. That evening she found me sitting outside my tipi, and she sat down nearby without being invited. She had gotten more comfortable with that, with just sitting near me without asking permission, and she said, I heard what that was. Some of it, I said. I don't want to cause trouble for you. I looked at her. You are not causing trouble for me. I am deciding what to do. Those are different things. She was quiet. Then, what are you deciding? The fire between us was small, just enough for light. I could see her face clearly. The sunburn had eased off and her skin had some color in it now that wasn't just damage. She looked, not softer exactly. She didn't have a soft face. She had a particular kind of face, lean and direct, but more settled. Like a person who has eaten regular meals for a month begins to look like a different person than the one you first found. I said, I am deciding what it means that I don't want you to leave. She didn't look away. What does it mean? I'm still deciding, I said. She looked at the fire, a small smile at the corner of her mouth, that crooked one. She mostly kept it close to the vest, used it sparingly. That one that night cost her something and she gave it anyway. We sat there for a while longer without talking. The camp sounds settled around us, a child somewhere, dogs, the horses moving at the picket line. Ordinary sounds, the sounds of people at rest in the place they belong. I thought, I have not felt that in 4 years. At rest in the place I belong. I had been doing my duty. I had been doing it well enough, I believed. But there is a distance between doing your duty and being at rest in your life, and I had been living in that distance for 4 years, and right now, sitting in the firelight with this woman I had known for 6 weeks, the distance didn't feel as wide. I didn't say any of that. I filed it away. A man does not always have to say what he knows. There was a man, I should tell you about him. His name was Aldrich, Hale Aldrich. He ran cattle on a claim about 12 miles east of our camp's current position, and he had been running them partly over land that was technically within our territory for 2 years. Not by accident. Aldrich was not the kind of man who did things by accident. He did it because he believed that territory was settled by whoever was willing to hold it, and that we were not going to hold it, and he might as well start now. I had spoken to the agent about it. The agent had written letters. The letters had produced nothing, or nothing yet, which in my experience meant nothing ever. Aldrich knew this, and I knew he knew it, and the knowing made him bolder by small degrees each season. He came to the camp in October, 3 weeks after Caroline had arrived. He came with 4 men, and he came at mid-morning, which meant he wasn't sneaking, which meant he wanted to be seen. He wanted to make a point. He rode to the edge of camp and stopped and sat on his horse and waited, which was how men like him indicated they expected someone to come to them. I took my time. I finished what I was doing, which was examining the left foreleg of one of the camp's horses that had been favoring it. I told the boy who was holding the horse to keep him still for another day. Then I walked to where Aldrich was and stood there looking up at him. He was a big man. Not fat, just large, tall, wide in the shoulder, with a face that had been weathered into something like leather and small eyes that moved a lot, never quite landing on you directly, always cutting to the sides and then back. He wore 2 guns and didn't have to reach for either one. They were just part of how he was put together. He said he'd heard I had a white woman at my camp. I said I had a woman staying at my camp, yes. He said he thought it might be more appropriate for her to be among her own people. I looked at him, I said, appropriate. More fitting, he said, for all concerned. I knew exactly what he was doing. He was looking for a lever. A white woman at a Lakota camp was the kind of thing that could be made into a story, and he knew the story, and he wanted to use it. The particulars of Caroline's actual situation were irrelevant to him. And I want you to understand what happened inside me at that moment, because it matters. It was not anger. Anger is hot and fast, and it makes a man stupid. I have watched anger ruin good men, and I have worked hard my whole life to know the difference between anger and the thing that lives below anger, which is colder and more useful. What I felt was that colder thing, clear and still as the creek in October when the first frost has come. And what I thought was, you are not taking anything from me. Not today, not any day. I said, the woman stays at my camp because she chooses to. If she wishes to leave, she will leave. No one here compels her. That is her decision to make, and she has made it. I am not going to discuss it further. Aldrich tilted his head a little, the way men do when they're deciding how much further to push. Chief, we are done with this conversation, I said. One of the men with him shifted in his saddle and made a sound. I looked at that man once, not long, just once, and he went still. Aldrich stayed where he was for another few seconds. Then he said something I won't repeat, and he turned his horse, and the four of them rode back east. I stood and watched them go, the whole way until I couldn't see them anymore. Thachewin was behind me. I hadn't heard her come up, but I wasn't surprised to find her there. She said quietly in Lakota, he'll come back. Probably, I said. The woman should know. Yes, I said, she should. Caroline was standing near Thachewin's tipi when I came back into the camp proper. She had seen some of what had happened, most of it. She watched me walk toward her, and she didn't ask anything until I was close enough that we didn't have to raise our voices. Who was that? She said. I told her Aldrich's name, and roughly what he ran and where, and what he'd been doing with our land for 2 years. She nodded slowly, taking it in. He looking for trouble. He was poking at things, I said, to see what would move. And nothing moved, I said. She held my eyes for a moment. Her jaw had that working quality again, thinking something through, deciding something. He might come back. My sister says the same thing. Your sister is smart, she paused. What happens if he comes back? I said, then I handle it. I've been handled enough in my life, she said. There was no heat in it, just fact. A plain statement of something she'd learned at cost. I know, I said. That's not what I mean. I stand in front of whatever comes. That's my choice. Not because you can't manage yourself. You had that rifle pointed at me before you knew a single thing about me, and your hands were steady. I know what you are. But there are things a man does because he is able to, and because someone he cares about should not have to do them alone. I hadn't planned to say that much, the last sentence in particular. She looked at me a long time after that. Her eyes were brown, a particular shade of brown that was close to the color of creek mud but wasn't exactly, warmer than that, deeper in the center. And in the afternoon light they were clear and direct in the way her whole face was clear and direct. Someone you care about, she said. Yes, I said. She looked down, then back up. All right, she said. I didn't know quite what she was agreeing to. Probably she didn't fully know either. But she said it like something had been decided, and her part in it was settled. And I found I was glad of that in a way I couldn't have explained to anyone. Aldrich came back in November. He came at night this time, which was different. He came with more men, 7, maybe 8. I didn't have an exact count in the dark. And they came quietly, which meant he'd moved past poking at things and had decided to do something about the fact that nothing had moved. They didn't come into the camp. They came to the edge of it, and they set fire to a stack of cut wood that Thaddeus and 2 other women had spent 3 days preparing for the winter. 3 full days of work, hauling dead wood from the ridge, cutting it to length, stacking it right so it would stay dry. The fire woke people. My people responded the way people do when they have had to respond to threats in the night for generations, quickly and without panic, which is a different thing than without fear. Quickly and without panic means you do the thing, you don't stop to feel the feeling first. The feeling comes later when the thing is done. Buckets of water, young men forming up, watching the dark for anything that moved. The women with children getting them clear of the smoke. Thaddeus got the children out of her tipi and to the far end of camp before anyone thought to tell her to. By the time I had my rifle and was moving, the wood was already half gone. We pushed the fire back enough that it didn't spread to any of the lodges. But 3 days of work burned, gone in an hour. I stood at the edge of the charred ground in the dark and I felt something I have felt before and I do not have a word for in English. In Lakota we say chante chihila yuzepi, they have taken your heart in their fist. Not broken it, just gripped it. The fist around the thing that keeps you going, squeezing until you feel it. The smell of burned wood. The black patches on the ground still hot, still glowing at the edges in places. The men standing around with water buckets still in their hands, nobody talking. The camp entirely awake, everyone out, everyone standing. I stood there and breathed and let the cold feeling come up and I thought, you don't get to take this from me. Not this, not the next thing, not the thing after that. Caroline was standing 6 feet from me. She had soot on her face and her hands from helping with the water, and she was looking at the burned ground with her jaw set in the particular way that meant she was angry but had it under control. She said without turning, "This is because of me." "Partly," I said. I wasn't going to lie to her about it. "I should go." "No," I said. "If I'm not here, he loses his." "No," I said again. And then I said something I'd been clear about in my mind for a while but hadn't said aloud until that moment. "If you leave because of this, then he has taught me that this is how to move people, and I will spend the rest of my life being moved by men like him. I will not teach him that." She turned to look at me. I kept my eyes on the burned ground. "Also," I said, "I don't want you to go." She was quiet for a moment. Then she came to stand beside me, shoulder at my arm close. We stood there looking at what was left of 3 days' work. The thing I want you to understand about that moment, she didn't come to stand beside me out of gratitude. She wasn't comforting me. She was standing where she wanted to stand, in the same place I was, facing the same thing I was facing, choosing to be there because she decided it was where she belonged. A woman with her own fire and her own spine and a sharp's rifle she knew how to use and 22 years of surviving alone, and she was next to me because she decided to be. That's the kind of thing you can't manufacture. You can't demand it and you can't earn it exactly. You can only be the man who didn't flinch and didn't bend and didn't send her away and wait to see if that's enough for someone. It was enough. I went to see the agent the next morning. Alone, before first light, a hard 4-hour ride on a cold morning with frost on the grass and the sky just beginning to go gray at the east edge. His name was Pemberton, Warren Pemberton, a thin man with spectacles and ink always on the side of his right hand who, in my experience, was not a bad man exactly, but was an overwhelmed one. A man who had more on his account than he could pay and knew it, and spent considerable energy finding reasons not to look at it directly. He lived in a small wood house at the edge of the agency with 2 drooping porch steps and a flag on a pole that was always at half-mast because the rope had snagged. He came to the door in his undershirt when I knocked. It was early. He blinked at me through his spectacles. I told him what Aldrich had done. I told him exactly, without embellishment, which is always more convincing than embellishment. The number of riders I'd estimated, the time they'd come, what they'd burned, the value of what had been destroyed in labor and in the wood itself going into winter. He rubbed his face. He said, "You have witnesses." "The entire camp," I said. "I mean," he stopped. He knew what he'd been about to say and thought better of it. "What are you asking me to do?" "Your job," I said. "Write to the marshal. Document what happened and sign your name to it. What Aldrich did was criminal destruction of property regardless of who owned it, and he knew it was, which is why he came at night." Pemberton looked at me over his spectacles for a moment. "He'll claim provocation. He'll say you had a white woman there against her will." "The woman is there by her own choice and could leave at any moment," I said. "She has a rifle and a horse and she is not a prisoner. If anyone wants to speak with her, they may do so. She will tell them exactly that." I paused. "Write the letter anyway. Put it in the official record. When the next thing happens, and there will be a next thing, because men like Aldrich don't stop at wood, it won't be the first." Pemberton looked at me a moment longer. Then he nodded. "All right," he said. "I'll write it today." I don't know if he did or not. I believe probably yes. It had that quality, the quality of a man doing a thing because it was pointed out clearly enough that he had no good reason not to, and the weight of not doing it had become slightly heavier than the weight of doing it. Men like Pemberton operate on those scales constantly. I rode back to camp. The ride back was cold and long, and I spent most of it not thinking about Aldrich or Pemberton or what might come next. I spent it thinking about Caroline standing beside me in the dark with soot on her hands. The choice she'd made, wordless just by where she stood. My father, toward the end of his life, said to me once, "The people who choose to stand beside you when it costs them something, those are the only ones who matter." He said, "Everything else, the rank and the victories and the horses and the fear in other men's eyes, none of it keeps you warm. Only the people who choose." He was talking about my mother. He always was by then when he said things like that. She had died the year before, and he was still talking about her in everything he said. I understand that better now than I did when he said it. December came. The first snow came with it. There is a particular quality to the first real snow of the year in that country, not the wet, heavy snow that comes sometimes in October and breaks branches, but the dry, clean, first-of-winter snow that falls straight down in the still air and covers everything in a skin of white about as thick as your hand is wide and then stops. Everything muffled. Everything made exact and quiet. The whole world looks new in a way that isn't sentimental, isn't hopeful exactly, it's just true. A new skin over everything, and what's underneath is still what it was, but for a few hours you can't see the scars. I woke that morning before anyone else, as I always do, and I went outside into the cold and stood for a while looking at the camp in the new snow. The smoke from banked fires in the tippies rising straight up into cold air, the horses standing quiet at the picket, the lodge covers white on top and brown below, the dogs curled up tight against the cold, everything still. I had come outside because in the years since Weena I have not slept well, and the early morning outside alone is better than the early morning inside alone. Outside I can see things, can hear the world going about its business, and that is better than lying still in the dark with nothing but your own mind for company. My mind has never been restful company. After a while I heard the sound of someone else outside, and I turned. Caroline. She had my sister's extra blanket around her shoulders and her hair loose, and she was standing about 10 feet from me looking at the snow. Her breath made small clouds in the cold air. She hadn't pulled on her boots all the way. She had her feet shoved into them and the laces were loose. She said, "It's quiet." "Yes," I said. She came to stand beside me. We had developed by then a kind of fluency in each other's silences. I knew when hers meant she was thinking something through. I knew when they meant she was somewhere else back on the train, or in the children's home, or in one of the other places her life had taken her. And I knew when they meant she was simply here and content to be here without needing anything said. This was the third kind. After a while she said, "I used to hate the first snow. In Indiana, it meant another winter in the home." She paused. "I don't hate it right now." "Good," I said. "It's not nothing, you know, that I'm not somewhere else right now." She looked at me sideways. "That I'm here." "I know," I said. "Do you?" I turned to look at her properly. She was still looking at the snow, but her chin was tipped up a little, and there was something in the line of her jaw that I had learned meant she had decided something and was in the process of saying it. Not asking, saying. I waited. She said, "I've been in a lot of places since I was 8 years old. More places than most people see in a lifetime, though not by choice and not in a way that was pleasant. I've stayed places because I had to, moved on because I had to. I've never been anywhere that felt like I was supposed to be there, like it was built for me or I for it." She paused. "This doesn't feel like that either." She stopped again, started over. "It feels like you, like where you are is the place. It doesn't matter where that is." I had not said those things to her, not those words. I had said I didn't want her to leave. I had said I cared about her. I had stood in front of Aldrich and made plain, without saying it directly, that she was mine to protect. But I had not said what I was holding, which was that since Weena died I had been going through the motions of living, doing the work, doing my duty, doing all of it without any center to it, just going, and that since I found Caroline by the creek that had changed. Some slow warming of something I had thought was finished. Something that had turned cold and gone out and was coming back. I said, "That is how I feel also." She turned to look at me. Her eyes in the snowlight were dark and clear and entirely direct. She lifted her hand and put it against the side of my face, not asking permission, not tentative, just sure, the way she did most things, with her mind made up and no apology for it. Her palm against my jaw, cold from the air outside. She looked at me the way I have seen very few people look at me in my life, with the whole of their attention, nothing held back, nothing calculating, just looking, just seeing. I put my hand over hers. We stayed like that, the snow around us still, the camp still, the horses standing still, the smoke going up straight in the cold air. She said quietly, "Don't send me away." I said, "I am not going to send you away." She nodded, that crooked smile, higher on the left. Then she leaned in and put her forehead against my chest, and I put my arms around her, both of them, and held her there in the cold and the quiet and the first of winter snow. That was the morning I understood what I had been deciding since the day I found the dead crow in the grass and followed the smoke. Some decisions are made long before you make them. The body knows before the mind catches up. I had been riding toward this since August, and I was only now in December, in the first snow of winter, with this woman's forehead against my chest, permitting myself to know it. I should tell you about Thomas, because that part matters, even though I was only a small piece of it. In the spring after that December morning in the snow, I went to the town of Harlow on band business, to meet with a lawyer there about a survey dispute regarding the territory's eastern boundary. It was a 2-day ride, the kind of errand that eats time and returns nothing visible, just the slow maintenance of standing your ground in courts and offices instead of open country. Necessary work. Unglamorous work. The lawyer's office was above a dry goods store on the main street. I came out of the meeting about noon. The meeting had produced a letter promising further correspondence, which is the legal way of saying nothing. And I was standing on the board sidewalk outside, putting my hat on, when a man came out of the dry goods store below with a 50-pound sack of feed over one shoulder and a smaller bag of something in his other hand. He was about 26, broad in the shoulder, working build. He had a face that was open and plain in the way of men who spend most of their time outdoors, a good sunburn, lines at the corners of his eyes from squinting. And he had something in his face, some quality in the way his eyes were set, some shape to his brow and jaw that made me stop where I was. I had spent 8 months looking at Caroline Foss's face. I knew it well enough by now to recognize pieces of it somewhere else. I said, "Excuse me." He turned. He saw me and his expression was careful, not hostile, not afraid, just cautious the way a reasonable man is cautious when a stranger addresses him on the street. I said, "Your name." He set the feed bag down on the edge of the sidewalk and looked at me for a moment. Then, "Foss," he said, "Thomas Foss." I looked at him for a long moment. He looked back. I said, "I believe I know your sister." He went very still, not afraid, just arrested. The way a man looks when something he had half given up on suddenly reappears in front of him. I will not tell you everything about bringing Thomas to Caroline. Some things belong to the two people in them, and they lose something essential when they're handed to a third. What I will tell you is this. I rode back to camp with Thomas Foss beside me, this young man with his sister's eyes and his sister's jaw, and a way of going quiet when he was thinking that was exactly like hers, and the ride took 2 days, and in those 2 days he told me what his life had been. The farmer who took him was a decent man. The wife with the kind face had been kind, in fact, not just in appearance. He'd grown up farming, married a local girl, had a daughter 2 years old named me. He'd been trying to find Caroline since he was old enough to write a letter, but the letters had gone to the wrong county office and had never found her. I told him about Caroline, about where I'd found her and how she'd come to the camp and how long she'd been there. I told him she was well. I told him she was strong, that she had always been strong, I thought, though I'd only known her 8 months. He listened without interrupting. On the evening of the first day, by the fire, he said, she was the one who kept me calm on the platform when they were looking at us. She held my hand the whole time and she told me with her eyes not to be scared. He was quiet for a moment. I wasn't scared because of her. Then she was gone. We rode the rest of the way without talking much. Some things don't need talking. We came over the last rise and down into the camp in the early afternoon on the second day. The light was spring light, the particular pale gold of April in that country, and I saw Caroline outside Thaddeus's tipi, working on something, some piece of sewing, I think, though I couldn't see exactly at that distance. I saw the moment she looked up. I saw her go still. Thomas got down off his horse. She walked a few steps and stopped. She was looking at him the way you look at something you think might not be real, the way you look at something you've looked for so long that when you find it you don't quite believe it yet. He was looking back at her the same way. Then she walked the rest of the way and they were together, and I went to take the horses and give them what they needed. Thaddeus found me at the picket line a little while later and looked at me for a moment without saying anything. She had been doing this her whole life, looking at me without saying anything until she decided what she wanted to say. She said in Lakota, "You found him on purpose." "I went to a lawyer's meeting," I said. And I paid attention," I said. "That's all, I paid attention." She made the sound, the exhale, but this time there was more weight in it, a different kind. Not the one that means criticism held alongside acceptance. The one that means, you are more than people think. She used it rarely. I had been collecting them my whole life, the times my sister used that particular sound on me. There were not many. I had earned each one. Thomas stayed 3 days. He was a good young man, steady in the way that men who have worked hard ground their whole lives are steady, not showy, not soft, just reliable in the way a good piece of iron is reliable. He told Caroline about his wife and his daughter with some nervousness, as if she might feel left out, and she laughed, which I could see surprised him and pleased him at the same time. On the second night, all 4 of us sat outside, Thomas, Caroline, Thaddeus, and myself, and there was a fire and there was talk, some of it easy and some of it harder, things that had been 22 years in the unsaying. Caroline told him some of what those years had been like. He told her some of what his had been. There were silences in it that weren't empty. They were the silences of people who are trying to hold something carefully because it is fragile and they don't want to drop it. Thatchwin, to her credit, said very little and kept the coffee coming, which was exactly what was needed. At one point, Thomas looked at me across the fire. He had been looking at me throughout the evening in the cautious, assessing way of a man trying to understand a situation, trying to place me in a category he understood. I had let him look. He said carefully, "You've been looking after my sister." "She looks after herself," I said, "but yes." He looked at Caroline. She was watching the fire, and there was something in her face, an ease I hadn't seen before, a loosening around the eyes that I understood was about him being here, about the thing that had been missing for 22 years being suddenly present. She looked like a person who has set something down that they have been carrying so long they had forgotten they were carrying it. Thomas said, still looking at his sister, "Thank you." I didn't say anything to that. It didn't need an answer, and I didn't have one that would have been the right size for what he meant. After Thomas left, the camp moved to the summer site north and west, into the hills that stayed cool through the hot months, near water and away from the worst of the summer insects. Moving camp is work I have done every year of my life. There is a rhythm to it, a sequence, what comes down first, what gets loaded how, who rides where in the line. My people know it the way they know how to breathe. It doesn't need to be organized because it has always organized itself. Caroline had learned enough by then to be useful in the moving, not at the pace of someone who has done it since childhood, but she knew what to do and she did it without needing to be told twice. Thatchwin watched her that first day of moving and said nothing to me, which from Thatchwin about Caroline meant approval. The summer was a good one, as summers in that country go. Enough rain, the horses fat. The young men not idle, there was still hunting to be done, there was always something needed. The business with Aldrich had gone quiet. Whether it was Pemberton's letter or simply Aldrich deciding to wait, I didn't know. I kept watching the east. Caroline learned some Lakota. Not much, not quickly, but enough, the words for the daily things, the words for directions and needs and small courtesies. She had an ear for it, for the sounds of things. Thatchwin helped her without being asked to, which told me more than Thatchwin would have wanted me to know. Some evenings Caroline and I rode out alone, away from the camp into the hills, just riding, not going anywhere particular. The evenings in summer in that country go long, the light staying until very late, and there is a quality to the world in that last long light, the shadows long and soft, the hills turning colors they don't have during the day, the whole landscape opening up into something that is harder to name than beautiful. We talked on those rides, more than we had in the beginning, when words between us came in short, necessary bursts. Now they came easier, and some of what we said was the kind of thing that takes time to say, the lives we'd had, the years, the things we'd gotten wrong and the things we'd gotten right, and the things we still weren't sure about. She told me more about the children's home, the years of it. I told her more about Weena, about my sons. Things I hadn't said aloud in 4 years. She never tried to make the hard things easier by putting something better over them. She just listened. She had a way of listening that was entirely still, not the still of someone waiting for their turn to speak, the still of someone who is actually receiving what you're saying, taking it in, making room for it. I had not had that in a long time. I had not realized until I had it again how much I had missed it. The thing about being chief, the thing people outside it don't understand, is that you are never alone in the way a private person is alone. You are always the chief. In council, in decisions, in disputes between families, in negotiations with agents and lawyers and the occasional marshal who comes through with papers. The weight of all of that is on you all the time, and you carry it because it is yours to carry, and you accepted it when you accepted the role. And most of the time that is simply the truth of what your life is, and you don't think about it in terms of weight. But sometimes a man needs to be not the chief for a few hours, to be just a man, to talk to someone who sees him as a man first and a chief second. Weena had been that for me, 31 years of it. After Weena, I had been just the chief, always just the chief, and that had been, in its way, all right, necessary, even. I had needed to be all the chief I could be after her, but a man is not only his function. A man has a self inside the function, and that self needs tending too, and mine had gone untended for 4 years. Caroline tended it without knowing that's what she was doing, just by being who she was, by looking at me without the particular deference that people give a chief, and that I never entirely trusted because it curved around the truth. She looked at me straight. She disagreed with me on occasion, calmly and with her reasons, and she was right about half the time, which is about right. She made me laugh sometimes. Not often. She was not a woman who performed humor, but sometimes she said something so dry and precise that I laughed before I thought about it. I had not laughed easily in 4 years either. The autumn came, the second autumn since she'd arrived. The question of what she was had been settled in practice, if not formally, for some time. She lived in the camp. She worked with the women of the camp. She was known to the agent, who had been told simply that she was a woman who'd taken up residence near the band and could speak for herself. She could, and had. Pemberton had ridden out in the spring and spoken to her, and she'd looked him in the eye and told him plainly that she was there because she chose to be and had chosen no other place. Aldrich had not come back. I do not know if he ever would. There are men who test a thing until they find a wall and then move on to find a door somewhere else. There are men who come back. I kept watching the east. In September, a year after I'd found her at the cottonwood, I asked her to stay permanently. Not as a question. I am not, by nature, a man who makes a question out of something he already knows the answer to, and I had known for a long time that I was going to ask this, and I believed I knew what she would say. I said it as a statement of what I wanted and what I thought was true, and then I let her respond. I said, I want you to stay, not because you have no other place to go, you have Thomas now, you have somewhere to go. I want you to stay because I believe this is where you belong. I believe we are better together than we are apart. I believe I am a better chief and a better man when you are here. And I believe you have stopped going, which tells me you know this too. She looked at me for a long moment. The kind of look that is taking inventory, making sure she sees everything clearly, not missing anything. Then she said, when you found me at the creek, I had the rifle on you for about 30 seconds before I decided you were worth lowering it for. I remember, I said. I made that decision fast, she said, and it was right. She paused. This isn't fast, but it's the same kind of decision. I've been making it for a year and I'm done making it. The answer is yes. I am 61 years old as I tell you this. There is a night I think about sometimes when I'm trying to sleep in the early morning hours, the dead crow in the grass, and then the smoke, and then her at the cottonwood with the rifle raised and her hand steady. How close I came to just turning around. I had been 4 days alone on the plains, and I was tired, and I had a full day's ride back to camp, and there was a white woman with a rifle and no good reason to complicate my life. I turned toward the smoke. I always turn toward the smoke. It is, I think, simply how I am made. My father knew it when I was 5 years old. Outside my tipi right now there is a thin coat of frost on the grass. Another October. It was October when Aldrich first came, and it was October when Thomas and I rode back together, and it is October now, 10 years after that August morning at the creek. Caroline is inside. She is awake. I can tell by the sounds, the small adjustments of a woman going about the morning, and in a few minutes she will come out with coffee, and she will hand it across to me without asking and without looking at me directly, because that is still how she is in the mornings, and I will take it the same way I took it that second day at the rock overhang. With gratitude I don't say out loud because I don't need to. We have been all right. We have had hard years and good years, and the hard ones were hard in the ways that hard years are hard. The agency's promises falling short, the young men's restlessness, 2 more winters that took people we didn't want to lose. But the core of it has been solid. The core of it has been, she is here and I am here, and we are standing in the same place facing the same direction. I think about what I would have said to that man on the plains 10 years ago, the man riding alone who was tired and grieving and doing his duty without any center to it. I don't think I would have told him anything. He needed to find the smoke himself. He needed to turn toward it. Thomas comes every summer now with his wife and little me, who is 12 and has Caroline's jaw and her own particular way of looking at the world straight on. Last summer, me asked me to teach her how to ride properly, and I did, and she learned fast, the way children learn things when they actually want them. She was on the gray-spotted mare, the same one Caroline had ridden when I brought her to the camp. Old mare now, good and slow and patient. I watched me on that horse and I thought, the train left without her at 8 years old. A count that came out wrong. And everything that followed from that, the children's home, the years of moving, the cottonwood tree by the creek and the smoke and the rifle and the 8 months of learning and Aldrich and the snow and Thomas and all of it, everything that made her who she is. I don't know if the world is arranged in ways that mean things, or if it is simply itself, and we arrange the meaning after. I have thought about it long enough to know I don't know. What I know is this. The grass this morning is white with frost, and the smoke from the campfires is going up straight in the still air, and my sister is already up somewhere doing something useful, and in a few minutes Caroline is going to come out of the tipi with coffee. I am where I am supposed to be. I am who I was supposed to be. She made that possible, not by needing me, though she needed me in the beginning and I was glad of it, by choosing me, by standing beside me in the dark when it cost her something, and by telling me in the first snow of winter that where I am is the place. A man can do a great deal of living on that. A man can be a chief for 19 years and grieve what he has lost and carry what he must carry and stand in front of what needs standing in front of. And if at the end of the day there is a woman beside him who sees him, really sees him, all of what he is, the weight and the age and the sorrow and the stubbornness and the love he still has in him, and chooses to stay, that's enough. That has always been enough. The frost on the grass, the smoke going straight up, the sound of her inside moving almost mourning. I wait.